What's up everybody, I am Jaspreet Singh, and if you're like most people growing up, you were told don't worry about money, study hard in school, trust the system, and then you go out and enter the real world and now you have to figure it out. How do you become wealthy? Because you were never taught about money, you were never taught about building wealth, you were never taught about passive income, and you were never taught how to invest your money. Trust me, I get it. I went through high school, I went through college, I went through 1 year grad school, and then I went through law school, and during my time in all of this education, I didn't once learn a thing about money or investing my money or any sort of how do you create wealth. And now here I am, not working as an attorney, but instead I'm making videos on YouTube. How you doing? And not surprisingly, this lack of financial education is why the majority of people are broke. They have no savings, they have no investments, they have no plan on how to retire, and they're not happy in their lives. I was very fortunate though, because when I was in college, that's when I started getting exposed to financial education. I was working on a side hustle, and then I started reading a whole bunch of books about money, investing, and business. And then while I was in school, I went down this rabbit hole of financial education and trying to figure things out financially. So what I want to do today is go over 5 of the biggest lies that were told about money. These are things that I learned the hard way, so let's jump right into it. The first point that I want to talk about is climbing the corporate ladder. This is what we're all taught to do. Go to school, study hard, get good grades so you can get a good degree, so you can get a good job. That way you can ultimately climb the corporate ladder and earn a bigger salary. So the way it works is like this. You want to get a good job, and then you're going to work your way up. You're going to go from associate, analyst, to VP, to director, and maybe even get to one of those executive roles. Maybe you can become a CEO one day. But this is not what wealthy people are working for. Wealthy people are not working to climb the corporate ladder. Wealthy people are working to own the corporate ladder. Now, the interesting thing about this was, growing up, I was never told or knew that you could even do that. I never knew that you could own the corporate ladder, but this is what wealthy people are working for. Because when you're working to climb the corporate ladder, the one thing that you're working for is a salary. You're working for a payment for your labor. But that's not what wealthy people do. Wealthy people are looking for equity. They're working for the profits. So when you work for a company, you work 8 hours and then you get paid for 8 hours. When you own the company, now, you don't have to actually work in the company. You might, depending on what your position is, but you don't necessarily have to as the owner of a company. When you own the company, now what you're working for is at the end of the year, how much cash is left over in the bank account. Here's the thing, if you just follow the traditional system where you go to school and you get a job and that's how you make money, well, then you're just one step away from being broke, because you're relying on your salary and your salary only. What happens if you get sick and you can't go to work? What happens if your company is run into the ground by the executives? What happens if you lose your job? You get laid off, you get fired. Then what? Well, now you lose your income, and now you have to scramble. If you don't have any savings, you're going to have to go into debt to continue funding your lifestyle until you can go out and find another salary. This is why you want to think a little bit bigger. What wealthy people are working for is they're working to own the corporate ladder, not just working to climb the corporate ladder. Now, you might be hearing this thinking, well, Jaspreet, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't want to build a business, and I don't have millions of dollars to just go out and buy a company. Fine, that's how the majority of people are. But what you can do is you can work to climb the corporate ladder and own the corporate ladder at the exact same time. This is what you want to be working to do, and this is where the real wealth is built in our system. This is one of the things that I wish every school taught in high school, middle school, and even elementary school, that way you understood how this system works, because this was something that I had to learn through a very painful, a very emotional process, because it's just crazy that we're never told this type of stuff. We live in a capitalist society, and the way that you build real wealth in a capitalist society is through your capital. Remember, here, the way that you're making money is through your labor. But the way you make money here through your capital is by owning the company. Your capital is your money. So if you can take your capital, your money, and you can use your money to get equity or ownership in a company, now you're doing what wealthy people do. Wealthy people use their money to buy up equity, whether it be in companies or real estate or whatever asset you want to talk about. They use their money to buy these assets. That way they can get a piece of this. the profits. There's a few different ways that you can do this. If you're working for any sort of public company, then maybe you can get equity as a form of compensation where you're getting some stock in the company. Or if it's a publicly traded company, you can take some of the income that you're getting from the company, and if you believe in the company, you can use it to buy shares in the company itself, assuming you're not breaking any laws. You want to talk to the HR team at your company to make sure that there's nothing illegal with what you're doing there, but you can use your money to buy shares in the company. That gives you ownership in the company that you're working to build. Or if you don't have the ability to do that, then you can take some of the income that you're making from your company and use it to buy shares of other companies on the stock market, because as you're doing that, well, now you're building up shares of equity in these companies. The reason why this point is so important to understand, because it will help you understand the dynamics of companies across the country. Because in this system, the way it works is the executives, the people at the top of the food chain, or at least the people that most people assume are at the top of the food chain, the CEO, the other executives, they do have a boss. Their boss are the shareholders, the people who own the company. And they have a fiduciary duty, meaning they have a loyalty to increase the value of the share price, the equity. So the CEO's job and the executive's job is to do one thing. It's not to make the customers happy. It's not to make their employees happy. It's to make the shareholders richer. That's the name of the game. This is the legal fiduciary duty that the executives have. Now, the way that you do that is by creating a good product for your customers and making sure that your employees are happy and want to come to work every single day. But some executives are going to care less about these people and their customers than they are about these people. So what you want to do is understand the game and own some of this, right? Because in this situation, a lot of people get angry, they get upset because they hate how the system works. What I'm saying is learn the rules to the system. That way you can use the system to your advantage. And what wealthy people are doing is, instead of just trying to climb the corporate ladder, they're also working to own the corporate ladder. The second point that I want to talk about has to do with our money, or at least what we consider money, because most of us would consider our paper dollars, our cash, money. I grew up in a traditional Indian house. My parents are immigrants from a state in India called Punjab, and the traditional Indian culture is a save healthy culture. So growing up, I was always taught about the importance of saving money, and if I wanted to become wealthy, the way that I do that is by one, getting a good paying job, like by becoming a doctor, and then I save the majority of my money. But the interesting thing about that is, if I took $10,000 30 years ago and I buried this into the backyard and I just let it sit there, well, 30 years ago, this $10,000 would have been able to buy twice as much as what this $10,000 could today. This $10,000 lost half, 50% of its buying power over the last 30 years. Our cash, our dollars, are a liability for us to hold on to. This is where things get very interesting, because we're always taught about the importance of saving money. The banks always say, save your money. It's good to save your money in the bank. But the interesting thing is, if banks followed their own advice for saving money, then the banks would be broke. See, as soon as you deposit your cash in the bank, you think it's an asset. But for the banks, your deposits are a liability, because the cash that you're keeping in the bank needs to be spent. The banks need to invest this money as fast as possible because they don't want to keep this cash on their balance sheet. It's a liability for them. A liability is something that takes money away from your pocket. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. So what does the bank do? Well, as soon as you deposit your cash into the bank, which you think is an asset, the bank turns around, takes this liability for them, and then they're going to lend it out. As soon as the bank lends out this cash, it becomes an asset for them. So they take your cash that they tell you to save in the bank, and then they say that this liability is in the liability column, and then they move it to the asset column and lend it out immediately. Now what do? Well, they lend it out in the form of mortgages, credit card debt, and all these other things. They're getting paid 4, 5, 6, maybe 20% interest on this cash, and then they turn around and pay you next to nothing. And then on top of that, you have to fight inflation. The value of your dollars, what we call money, is dropping while the price of everything else keeps going up. So your cash is losing buying power while the bank keeps making money off of your cash. This is where it becomes very important for you to understand, what is money? Is money just a medium of exchange, like a currency, or is money supposed to be a store of value, something that keeps its value over time? We all need some sort of currency to buy and sell things. I mean, if you want to go to the grocery store and buy toilet paper, even if you're not in a toilet paper shortage, you need some sort of money or some sort of means of exchange to do that. But you also want to have a store of value. This is what wealthy people do, because what the majority of us are taught to do is we just keep our cash and we save it and grow that and hope that our savings will make us wealthy. But no wealthy person wants to just build this massive stockpile of cash because they understand that this cash is a liability. So what are they doing? They're taking their cash, which is fake money, and they're converting it into real money. This real money could be in the form of assets. These are things like stocks, real estate, real assets, businesses. This is something that is supposed to be producing more value, so the value of your asset goes up. So what wealthy people do is they don't want to just have a big bank account, they want a lot of assets. They want to own a lot of stocks, they want to own a lot of real estate because your real estate is producing cash flow and it gives you legal tax breaks. Real estate investors have some of the biggest tax breaks that our IRS code has to offer, or they're looking to use this cash to buy businesses. So that's the first thing they can do. Or if you are not in the right market to buy some of these assets, another thing that you could do is buy some commodities. So this could be things like physical gold. So what some rich people, wealthy people do, or even wealthier minded people, because you have to be wealthy in the mind before you're wealthy in your bank account, is they will take their cash, especially when you're in times of high inflation or worries of inflation, and they'll go out and buy things like physical gold. And then when they see asset prices drop, they will then sell that gold and then use that new cash to go out and buy these stocks. So it's another way of storing this money. Now, before you just go and dump your money into random assets or commodities, you want to make sure you do your research here. But the main thing that I'm trying to get across in this point is you have to understand that the value of your cash is dropping every single day because of something called inflation. As the government and the Fed continue to print more money, the value of each individual dollar goes down, which makes the majority of people poorer. Because if you're just holding on to cash and your only income is your salary has less buying power and your savings don't stretch as far. So the majority of people get poorer with this silent tax called inflation, because now the Fed can produce money out of nothing. They produce this money out of thin air. They give it to the government. The government doesn't have to raise their taxes, because if they had to raise your taxes, you would see a direct cost. But instead, they get this money from the Fed and then they spend it, and then you pay the price indirectly. You have to pay for more expensive groceries, you have more expensive vacations, you have more expensive health care, you have a more expensive cost of living through this inflation. So it's an indirect tax on the people who don't understand what money really is and how inflation works. The last thing that I want to say before we move on to number 3 is if you're looking for some guidance on how do you actually find good assets, whether it's stocks or real estate or cryptocurrency, you can check out Market Insiders. It's an investing education app that I created where every week you get access to stock market, real estate, and cryptocurrency coaching. If you want to try out Market Insiders for free, I'll give you a free 10-day trial, and you can do that by clicking the link down in the description below. The third point that I want to talk about is how money plays a part with your happiness, because there are so many misconceptions here on how money plays a part in your life. Because some people say that money can't make you happy, other people say that money will make you happy, but the reality is it's somewhere in the middle, and you have to understand this, that way you can understand how money plays a part in your life. So I like to diagram this through a triangle. I call this my quadruped theory, because if you want to live a fulfilled life, you have to understand how money plays a part in your life. Because while money itself isn't going to make you happy, if you don't have money, it can make you very, very, very miserable. So at the bottom of this quadruped triangle, I have physical fitness. If you want to live a healthy and happy life, you have to be fit in these 4 areas. And at the bottom is physical fitness, which means you have to be physically fit. Now, this doesn't mean you got to have a 6-pack, but what that means is if you're dying on your deathbed because you're morbidly obese, it doesn't matter how much money you have. The only thing you're going to care about is being healthy again. So you want to make sure that you're physically healthy, that way you can at least live your life. After that, you want to be mentally fit. If you are anxious, you're struggling with anxiety, you're struggling with depression, you're not happy, you're not surrounded by people that love you, you have a bunch of toxic people in your life, it doesn't matter how much money you have. I could give you $10 million today. That more money is just going to make you more miserable, because now you're going to realize how crappy of a life you have. If you are struggling with anxiety, you're struggling with depression, you're struggling with these things, you can't find this happiness, where you should be investing your money right now is in a therapist. Go into rehab, go find some sort of therapy, even if it's some sort of alternative therapy. Go find out how you can heal your mental health, because if you don't have this healthy mental health, you're not going to be able to go out and work and do things for financial success. You're not going to want to. You're not going to see the purpose. And even if you do, Because you think, oh, if I have more money, I'll start to be happy. People will like me. I'll have friends. I'll be surrounded by happy people. I'll get these toxic people away. You're just going to be more miserable because then you're going to realize that money wasn't the solution. So you have to take care of your mental health. And then you got to take care of your spiritual health. Now, this doesn't have to mean religion. When I talk about spiritual health, I'm talking about your purpose. Why are you on this earth? What are you waking up every single day to do? And this is something you want to start thinking about sooner rather than later because, that's why the saying is those who retire early die early, because when you work at a job for 40, 45 years and that's all you do and you hate your job and you sit there, you just work there, that way you can one day hopefully retire, and then you hit that retirement point, well then what happens? You sit at home on your sofa with nothing to do and then you start getting sick. You start to go into a whole bunch of holes physically, mentally, because you don't have a purpose. You don't have a reason to wake up every single day except to cry and yell at whoever's on TV. And this is where you want to start figuring out your purpose sooner rather than later. What are you here for? What is your purpose on this earth? How can you help people? That way you can start working for your purpose sooner, because if you have millions of dollars, but you have no reason to get out of bed, you're going to be more miserable. This is where being financially fit has the biggest benefit and the most power. Because now when you have financial health, financial fitness, you're wealthy, you understand money, now you can live a more happy and a more fulfilled life, because now more money is just the icing on the cake. It will help you live a more fulfilled life. It will let you live the more happy life. It will let you do the things that you want to do. It'll help you take care of yourself. It'll help you take care of your family. It'll help you take care of your community. Now, what you have to understand here is that more money here is not going to change your spiritual health or your mental health or your physical health. Sure, it can buy you better doctors, but by itself, it's not going to make you healthier. This is where you have to understand how money plays a part in your life, because without money, you're going to be very suffering here. And that can trickle down here as well into all the other aspects. But if you do have money, you have to understand it's just going to help you here. The fourth point that I want to talk about has to do with this concept of thinking bigger, but not in the traditional way, because most of us have limiting beliefs based off of what we're told around us and what our environment is. I know for me as well, I was told many times that I could never make it as an entrepreneur, that somebody who looks like me, who talks like me, who has a turban, who has a beard will never be able to make it on YouTube talking about things like finance. And when you hear these type of things, it can start to affect you and you start to believe, oh, maybe you're right. Maybe because I was grown up in a certain way, maybe because of who my parents are, maybe because of the color of my skin, I can't achieve something. Growing up, I was always told to become a doctor. I've talked about this many times, but I grew up in this traditional Indian house. And when you come from this type of culture, your parents want you to become successful. And in my house, that meant I had to become a doctor. I had no other options. And when I told my parents that I didn't want to be a doctor, they didn't believe it. It took my dad a long time to believe that I wasn't going to be a doctor. It took my mom a year and a half to actually believe that her son wasn't going to be a doctor. It was a very tough time. And I remember going through arguments with my parents and my family because I would get calls from random family members saying, Jaspreet, you're disgracing the family. Why aren't you doing something good in your life? Why do you want to go do this entrepreneurship thing? Do something that will bring pride to the family. Do something that will make you successful. Do something that will help you take care of your family. And when you hear these things again and again, you tell yourself, no, don't believe it. That's not true. But there's still that little voice in your brain. What if you're right? And I remember, talking to my parents, I want to be an entrepreneur. What if one day I could be a CEO of a company? And I remember hearing again and again, you can't be a CEO. You have no business experience. How can somebody like you be the CEO? How can you run a company? Now, the goal isn't just to be a CEO after I learned about the corporate ladder. You want to learn to own the company. But these were the types of things that I learned. And I always thought crazy. I always wanted to do big things. I just didn't know how I was going to do it, but it makes it very difficult. And this is where you have to remember that it is possible, because a lot of us don't have this type of support system that's going to say, hey man, or hey woman, hey girl, whatever, you got this. Just stick with it. Just fight through it. You'll get it. Just keep working. And that's one of those things where, all I can say is think bigger, because I always thought that I thought big. But then even when I started this YouTube channel, I remember joking around with my friends saying, if Minority Mindset ever gets 100,000 subscribers, I made it. That's it. And if we hit 1 million subscribers, I would just shut down the channel, because I never thought it was possible. And here we are today. We have passed 1 million subscribers. And this is me, somebody who thought I thought big, and yet I was putting these limiting beliefs on myself. The first step to achieving any sort of success is having a bigger mindset. You have to understand and believe it's possible for you, because if you don't, if we just keep hating on others, if you keep telling yourself you can't do it, if you keep coming up with excuses, you will never be able to achieve that success. So the first thing you have to do is believe that you can do it, because once you believe that you can do it, no matter where you come from, no matter who your parents are, no matter where you grew up, no matter how you look, no matter how you talk, no matter what, once you believe you can do it, then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to start learning. Now, this is a lot more accessible today because of YouTube. So now you can start learning. You can start watching videos, and you're going to start reading books. And then you're going to start taking some classes online. You're going to find some classes that you like, and you're going to start learning things. Some of them will be no good. Some of them will be very beneficial. And then you're going to start doing. And then once you start doing, you're going to go through a bunch of phases. You're going to go through failure after failure, but you're going to keep learning. And if you keep sticking with it, this is why it's so hard, because you have to go through all these phases, and then you have to keep sticking with it. And you have to do it again and again, and then eventually you're going to find something that you like, that makes sense, and then now you're going to put all these past failures together, and then you're going to build this, and then you're going to start to see that success that for the last decade you've been working to build, but you didn't really see that last decade worth of work, because now you're just starting something where you're putting everything that you learned together. But it all starts with that mindset and being willing to think different. Minority Mindset wasn't my first gig that I did. I went through side hustle after business, after investment, and then I started Minority Mindset as a hobby because I was working on a different business. I was working on my real estate investments. This was something that I was just doing because I wish somebody would have told me this stuff when I was growing up. And I was so focused on building another company, and then Minority Mindset slowly started to grow, and then I had to make a decision. What do? Do I work in Minority Mindset, which is not making me any money, or do I continue working on my business, which is making me money? Well, I liked the business, but I loved Minority Mindset. So then I went through with Minority Mindset, and it continued to grow, and it helped grow and start other businesses like Market Insiders and Market Briefs, which I talk about. But it all started with that mindset. And if there's one thing that will determine if you will become successful or not, I would attribute it to your mindset, because if you have the right mindset and you have the right work ethic, nothing will stop you. But if you don't have the right mindset, it's the shaky foundation. There's no way that you can build up any higher because your mindset is stopping you from going anywhere. And the fifth point that I want to talk about has to do with the idea of trusting the system. Because if you just trust the system and you do what everybody else does, you're going to end up like the majority of people. And the majority of people are broke, they have no investments, they have no savings, and they're miserable. So what I want you to do is start asking the question, why? Start questioning things, because this is what I did. And as soon as I started doing that, you start to go down this emotional and lots of realization things happening at the same time. And you're going to start to realize that, oh, maybe you shouldn't just blindly trust the system, because the reality is it's very profitable to keep you poor. It's very profitable to keep you financially uneducated. And this is where, as soon as you start to go down that financial education journey, you start to not trust the system, and you start to make decisions for yourself that are different than what the majority of people have always done and keep telling you to do. I'll give you a few examples. Banks make money when you are financially uneducated, because if you are more financially educated, you're not going to go to the bank and just keep borrowing money to buy a whole bunch of things that you can't afford, that you don't need, because now you're going to realize, oh, if I buy this $1,000 TV with money I don't have, this $1,000 TV is going to cost me $2,000. And if more and more people realize that, you wouldn't have so many big bank branches all across the country and across the world, because banks are making billions and billions of dollars funding people to buy things that they can't afford and that they don't need. Another one has to do with the school system, because we're always taught that you need to go to school if you want to go and become successful. And if you don't have the money to go and get higher education, just go and get student loans. We are told this across the board by everybody, from the government to our teachers to everybody. But the reality is these student loans are the reason why so many young people, millennials, are struggling. It's the reason why you can't buy a home. It's the reason why you can't buy a car. It's the reason why you're struggling to invest your money. It's the reason why you're struggling to save money. But at the same time, those same student loans are the number one asset for the United States government. The first time I heard that, I couldn't believe it. And if you don't believe me, go onto Google and just search the number one asset for the United States government. And you'll see the balance sheet for the United States government, and you'll see that student loans are one of the things that's keeping the United States government rich, but it's also keeping the majority of people broke. This is where, again, start Not just trusting the system, but asking the question why. What about the topic of taxes? Because all of us, again, we go to school and are told, go to school, get a good degree, get a good job. And that's how we're told to make money. But the reality is when you make money from a job, you also pay the highest tax rates. When you make money from a job, I can say this because I'm an attorney, although I'm not your attorney, but when you make money from a job, it's classified as something called ordinary income. And ordinary income has the highest tax rates that our tax code has to offer. However, if you are an investor, you get a preferential tax rate, which means you get lower tax rates. If you make $1 million as an investor and you make $1 million a year as a salary from a job, guess who gets to keep more money at the end of the day? Because it's different. Remember, it's not how much money you make that matters, it's how much money you get to keep after taxes. The investor will get to keep significantly more money than the person who makes $1 million from the job. If you make $1 million from a job, guess what? You might only get to keep around half, maybe a little bit more, but around half. About $500,000 after you work a year of maybe being a surgeon or whatever is earning you $1 million. If you make $1 million as an investor, guess what? You get to keep more than $700,000. Between $700,000 and $800,000 you will get to keep after taxes because of how you earn the money. And if you are a business owner, well, guess what? You also get preferential tax rates if you earn that same $1 million because now you get to spend money, you get to have your deductions before you pay any taxes. So guess what? If you earn money from a job, you pay the highest tax rates and you have the least tax breaks. But if you know how to invest your money, or if you start your own business, now you get preferential tax rates. And again, even if you don't want to be an entrepreneur and build your own company, you can still take advantage of the investment tax breaks, but that requires you to now build a whole new set of knowledge in financial education, hire the right people, hire the right tax advisors. That way now you can learn how the system works. Now, we do have other videos where I go over different tax strategies that you can do to legally pay less money in taxes on my YouTube channel, so you can check those out. But I'll leave you with this. If you do not want to end up like the majority of people, you can't keep doing what the majority of people do, and that starts by asking the question why. That way you can start questioning what's right and what's not right for you. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see how you can legally pay $0 a year in taxes, I made a video covering that and you can watch it by clicking this button right over there. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep hustling. And you're doing it completely tax-free, and while you're doing that, you're also growing the amount of money that you're making every single year.